My name is Dave, and I am your life coach today. And I want to find out if you are excited. And I want to find out if you are prepared. I want to find out if you are ready. Because today, I got to tell you, we're going to shoot for the moon. You know why we're going to shoot for the moon? Because if you shoot for the moon, and even if you fall short, you fall among the stars. We're going to swing for the fences. You know why we're going to swing for the fences? Because you cannot make contact with 100% of the balls you don't swing at. We are going to be calm and carry on. We are going to live, we're going to laugh, and we're going to love. Are you excited about that? Yeah. All right, then I need you to stand up. I need you to stand up. Everybody stand up on your feet. Come on. Here we go. Everybody standing up, and I need you to repeat after me. Ready? I am prepared. I am ready. I do believe. I am prepared. I am ready. I can do this. I am prepared. I am ready. I will succeed. All right, now turn around and tell 3 people around you, I am awesome. Turn around and tell them, I am awesome. I am awesome. I am awesome. I am awesome. Now before you sit down, give somebody around you a high five. Give them a big high five. High five. All right, give yourselves a big hand. As you're sitting down, go ahead and give yourselves a big hand. Now, I know what some of you here are thinking. What in the wide world of sports is happening right here? Did I wake up and go to the wrong church today? There may be some of you here for the first time, and you're saying, I definitely went to the wrong church today. This is a nut house. And there are some of you here today that are saying, what's he doing? Is he going to ask us for money? And I also know that there are some of you here, some of you got hardness in your heart, and you're sitting here going, that outfit is ridiculous. I feel ridiculous for him. In fact, I feel uncomfortable that he looks so ridiculous. But I also know that there are some of you here today who say, why don't we do this every week? We should do this every week. I want to come in and I want to get pumped up. And I know what you're thinking in your brain. You're thinking, where can I get one of them dope leisure suit warm-up outfits like Dave has on? Amazon.com, $19 a piece. Boom. And there's a few of you. I know there's a few of you that are here today, and you're wondering, what am I having for brunch today? You think I can beat the Baptists to Luby's? Are we Baptists? I'm not even sure. I think, but I'm not sure. Is it possible? I don't want to be, but maybe I am. Maybe, how does that work? You see, that's the thing. Do you know the difference between motivation and manipulation? Do you know the difference between, and what is the difference between someone who is self-assured and someone who is arrogant? What is the difference between a normal, healthy confidence and a narcissistic, unhealthy cockiness? It's a fine line between those two things. There is a fine line between arrogance and self-assurance. There's a fine line between that which is pure and that which is impure. Today, I want us to wrestle with where that line is in our lives, where that difference is. What is it that makes the difference between us being confident and us being cocky? It's quite possible today that what we recognize is that the thing that makes the difference is motive. Why? Why do you do what you do? And in a culture of bullies, we resort to judging people by their motives. And when we do, we place them on one side or the other of that fine line because it's virtually indistinguishable. It's like blending vanilla and chocolate ice cream together. It's hard to tell the difference between the two. So what we do is we wind up judging people by their motives, or what we suspect are their motives. Today I want to wrestle with that idea, this insidious bully of judging one another's motives. It's insidious because we don't even realize we're doing it to one another, and we certainly don't realize when others are doing it to us. And yet it is one of the most common things that we practice in our relationship with one another and how we view ourselves. Today I want to find the place and stand right on that dental floss thick line between motivation and manipulation, between self-assurance and arrogance, between confidence and cockiness. But before we go wrestling with those things, would you pray with me for a moment? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, that you would use your words spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to help us to discern the motives of others, our own motives, and even yours. Pray that we would be gracious in all these things. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. A number of years ago, my wife and I were very close friends with another couple in our church. And over the years, they had become some of our best friends. And at some point in our relationship, after a number of years of close friendship, we had a falling out. And the gentleman who was my friend had the integrity to come to me and to tell me that I had offended him. And he confronted me with what he believed I had done wrong. And he explained, and frankly to this day I don't remember exactly what it was that he said I had done wrong, but I do remember what he eventually accused me of. Even though I couldn't remember what I had done wrong, and it's likely that he was correct. I offend people all the time. I walk by people without noticing them. I get focused on where I'm going and run over people on my way there. And I'm in the habit of not being sensitive enough to people around me. I can see where that complaint would have validity, and I can receive that. What stuck with me, what I remember to this day, was that he accused me of doing that on purpose. That I was intentional in my disregard of others, that my motives were purely self-serving, that I was in this for myself, that while other people thought I was being selfless, he believed that I was really, truly a selfish person. The thing that has stuck with me for decades is the interpretation of my motivation and the accusation that I was somehow behaving like a jerk on purpose. I can live with being ignorant. I can live with making mistakes. What is hard for me to live with is to be perceived as a person who intentionally would hurt someone else. I'm sure all of you are familiar with that kind of conversation. I'm sure all of us from time to time have experienced that kind of bullying. The kind of bullying that labels us or places on us or judges us to have less than pure motives. 6 weeks ago, we began a conversation about the life of one of the most interesting and one of the most important characters in the Bible, particularly in the Hebrew Bible. His name is Joseph. He is the son of Jacob, the great-grandson of Abraham. His story takes up the last third of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. And as we have wandered around in Joseph's life for the last 5 weeks, we've been wrestling with what does it mean to live a life of faith in a culture of bullies. Today we come to 3 chapters at the end of the story, or near the end of the story of the life of Joseph, that are the most difficult for us to understand. Genesis chapter 42, 43, and 44. Because it's in these 3 chapters, at this story near the end of Joseph's life, where on the face of it, Joseph behaves like a real jerk. And Joseph is the hero of the story. Joseph is an icon. Joseph is an archetype. He is a forerunner of the person of Christ. He is universally regarded as a man of pure heart and pure intent, and of righteous behavior. But in these 3 chapters, it is possible to see Joseph as a petty and vengeful and mean person. Genesis chapter 42, the story picks up at the beginning of a 7-year famine, or a few years into it. You see, Joseph, at least 20 years before, had been sold into slavery and then thrown into prison. He had been sold into slavery by his own older brothers, and he had been 17 years old when he was sold to human traffickers and taken to Egypt. He spent a number of years enslaved to an Egyptian man named Potiphar, and then a number of years in Pharaoh's prison, in Pharaoh's dungeon. It says that he was in those prisons, in that condition, for 13 years, from the age of 17 to the age of 30. At 30, he was released from prison because he predicted, or he correctly interpreted a dream of Pharaoh and predicted that Egypt and the whole world would experience 7 years of abundance, a bumper crop, a bull market, and then followed by tragic, devastating 7 years of famine. Well, Genesis chapter 42 begins in the famine. And the famine is so widespread that the entire Fertile Crescent, from the northern part of Africa, through Palestine and Canaan, through Saudi Arabia, up into Macedonia and Lower Asia and into Greece, the entire known world was starving to death. And the only place in the world that there was food was Egypt. And the only reason there was food in Egypt was because of Joseph. And Joseph, now 20 years or 25 years into his story, probably somewhere between 37 and 43 years old, had ascended to second in the kingdom. His family, who he had not seen in over 2 decades, was starving to death. And his own father, Jacob, sent his 10 older brothers to Egypt to buy food. When they arrived in Egypt, Joseph recognized them immediately. They didn't know who he was. He spoke Egyptian. He dressed like an Egyptian. He was second in command in the Egyptian dynasty to Pharaoh, so they bowed down to him. They paid him respects. But Joseph recognized them, and it says that he treated them harshly. He spoke to them roughly. In that moment, he could have said, "Guys, it's me, Joey, your little brother. Isn't this amazing? Here you are." He says, No. I know who you are. I know what you did to me. Bow before me, just like I had seen in my dream over 20 years earlier. You don't know it, but what you're doing is exactly what I said you would do. But he doesn't say, "I told you so." He basically makes accusations and he messes with their mind. He says, "I think you guys are spies. What are you doing here? You're just here to see how you can steal from us, from our storehouses. You're looking for our vulnerabilities, aren't you?" And they go on to explain, No. We're just Hebrew brothers. We're guys from the land of Canaan. We have a father. There's 12 of us. Well, actually, there's 10 of us, and then there's one who kind of disappeared. And then we have a younger brother who didn't come with us. So there's 12, kind of 11, and a missing brother. And they explain their whole story, and Joseph plays with their heads. Says, Really? 12 brothers, one of them missing? Prove it. Where is the youngest one? I'm going to hold all of you in the dungeon, by the way, that I lived in. I'm going to hold all of you in that dungeon, and I'm going to send one of you back to your father to go get your younger brother so I can find out whether you're lying to me or not. And so it says that he threw them into jail for 3 days. Probably the same dungeon he had been in years before. After 3 days, he brings them out of the jail and he says, look, guys, okay, I'm a God-fearing man. I have a faith that you would understand. You have no idea how you would understand it, but trust me, you would understand my faith. And I think I should cut you a break. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm only going to keep one of you. I'm going to keep one of you hostage while the other 9 of you go back to your father. And I'm going to give you the food that you requested. I'm going to load up your donkeys. I'm going to save your families' lives, feed your hungry families. And the 9 of you will go back, but I'm going to hold one of you until I lay my eyes on that alleged younger brother so that I know you're not lying. You have to bring him back to me. Well, they pack up their donkeys and they leave in their caravan back to Canaan. And at the end of the first day, on the first night, they're settling into their camp. And one of the brothers opens his sack to feed the animals. And lo and behold, on the top of the grain sack is their money. Now, the story doesn't tell us that when they saw that, they said, what do we do? I guess we should go back and return it. No, they just kept going. They kept going the way they were going because they thought they had gotten away with something. And so they go back to their father in Canaan, and they tell their father everything that had happened, and their father loses his mind. How could you be such idiots? How could you tell them all the details of our family, and then when you found your money back in your sacks, you didn't take it back to him? You've condemned all of us. I've lost one son, and now I have another son in prison, and you think, in order to negotiate with a guy who you just stole from, I'm going to give them another son? I'm unwilling to sacrifice any more than this at all, ever. And Genesis chapter 42 ends with a discouraged and disappointed Jacob and brothers who are frustrated at their own stupidity because of what Joseph was doing to them. Genesis chapter 43 begins, and we don't know how much later, but it says that the famine had grown worse. They had gone through all of the supplies they had gotten in Egypt. We don't know whether this was weeks, months, or years later, but at some point they were starving to death. And Judah says, we've got to go back, but in order for us to go back, we have to take Benjamin with us. And Jacob, their father, says, I can't give up another son. I can't lose another son to this crazy scheme. And then Judah says, but if we don't take him, we'll all die. We're all starving to death. So it's a question of whether we put his life at risk or certainly lose ours, because the man said he wouldn't see us if we didn't bring him with us. So what do you want to do? Put it on me, Dad. I'll take responsibility. And so there in Genesis chapter 43, Jacob says, go ahead and go. And they return to the land of Egypt. They return to Joseph. And as they come in before him, he sees that they've brought Benjamin with him. This is his blood brother, who he never met. He was born after he was sold into slavery, or he was very young when Joseph was betrayed and sold into slavery. He hadn't seen him in over 20 years. And when he sees him, he says to his steward, make a dinner, prepare a meal at my home. I'm going to meet them there at noon. And so all of the Hebrew brothers go to Joseph's house, and they're anxious about this. They're like, what is going on? We're getting played here. We're probably going to get sold into slavery. This is not going to go well. Well, at noon, Joseph shows up at his house, and he welcomes them, and he asks about their father, who happens to be his father. And they bow down to him and they say that your servant, our father, is well. And Joseph asks questions, and then he asks about Benjamin. And when he sees Benjamin, it says that he completely loses it. It says he has to excuse himself, and he goes outside of the room, and he has a good cry because he's so emotionally connected still to his family. But he's not done with them yet. It says that they sat down, and Genesis chapter 43 ends with them eating and drinking freely. They partied together as if nothing was wrong. But the next morning, Joseph has one more play, one more twist of the knife, one more act to make life hard for his brothers. And he says, he tells the steward to put the money back in the bags as they had the last time, but this time take his royal chalice, his silver chalice, the thing that identifies him as royalty, and place it in the bag of the youngest one, of Benjamin, and send them on their way. And so as the brothers leave the city, they've barely left the city when Joseph says to his steward, go catch up with them and call them out for stealing my chalice. Well, the steward catches up with them and says, how could you do this thing? How could you be so outrageous? And they're like, do what thing? What did we do? And he says, you stole my master's chalice. And because you stole my master's chalice, you're all going to become my slaves. Or you know what? Because I'm a gracious man, the one who stole it will become my slave. Now open your bags. And they fall all over themselves to open their bags. And sure enough, the bag of Benjamin contains the chalice. The brothers lose their mind. It says they ripped their clothes and they fell on the ground. And they begged for mercy, and they made their way back to Joseph's home. And there he was at home when they showed up. And Judah begins an appeal. And he's losing his mind. He's saying, I understand that we're bad people. I understand that we have made bad choices in our life, but why would we do something like this? We've done everything that you ask us to do. We brought back the money that we took with us before. We've doubled that price. We came back to you. We brought our brother even as you have asked. Why would we steal from you? And Genesis chapter 44 ends with Judah making his final appeal. He says, if you send us back, we're all guilty because we're all one. And if you send us back without our brother, it will kill our father. And it will be our fault. So please don't send us back. Because if you send us back without our younger brother, our father will die in grief. What a jerk. What a jerk Joseph is. I mean, when his brothers showed up in Egypt after 25 years, he could have very easily come out to them right then and say, hey guys, it's me, Joey, your little brother, remember? Hey, how's everybody doing? How's it been going? 20 years, that's great. But he didn't. He didn't say, oh, all is forgiven, let's move on. He pretended like he didn't even know who they were. He seriously messed with their heads and jacked with them and taunted them and acted vengefully toward them, didn't he? He was kind of petty with them. I mean, it's possible, it's reasonable for us to imagine that's okay. I mean, they betrayed him. They threw him in a pit. They sold him to human traffickers. He spent years in slavery and in prison. And even though he had made a good life for himself in Egypt, it was no thanks to them. So I think all of us, can't we understand that he may deserve a little payback? It would be reasonable for him to be operating from his pain. To say, you hurt me, now I will hurt you, because we know that hurt people hurt people. It's reasonable for him to have expressed some of that attitude of wanting to twist the knife and get his pound of flesh. But you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't seek revenge on them, because he could have. When they came in, he could have come out and said, I'm your brother. Remember the one you threw in the pit? And you sold into slavery, and now I am the second most powerful man in all of Egypt, and I snap my fingers and I wipe you off the face of the earth. Because that's how things were done in that day. It was called an eye for an eye. You hurt me, I will hurt you. But he doesn't do that. So which is it? It's reasonable to imagine that he was angry and he was upset and he wanted revenge, but it's also reasonable to imagine that he was wise and gracious, like he was a wise parent. The decisions that a parent makes when they challenge their children to do the harder things, to have the consequences of their actions measured out in their life, and you don't prevent them from that. You know how hard that is to do as a parent? You know how hard it is, how wise you have to be to know when the lessons they have to learn, they have to discover for themselves, so you have to let them suffer the consequences of their choices? That's not vengeful, that's not pity, that's gracious, that's wise, that's intelligent. So maybe Joseph wasn't vengeful and petty. Maybe Joseph was wise and intelligent and gracious and doing what he knew was best for his brothers, letting them find their way back to him. Because we know that he knew who they were. We know that he recognized them before they recognized him. And we know he was emotionally connected to them. 2 times in this story, he had to pull himself out of the room because he was so overwhelmed with the emotion of his connection to his own family. So which is it? Is he a vengeful jerk, or is he a wise and generous younger brother? Why was he doing what he was doing? What were his motives? Which do you think he was? I'm not going to tell you, because I can't. Because he's both. Because it's unreasonable for us to imagine that he was not affected by the 20+ years that he suffered away from his family at the hands of his brothers. And it's also unreasonable to imagine that he wasn't being intentional and gracious and kind to his own family. You see, it was both. You see, that's the tricky thing about motives. They're rarely pure. They're usually an alchemy of purity of motives and a dark side of selfishness or of what can I gain. If we examine ourselves closely, if we ask ourselves the hard questions, if we do the good, healthy work of evaluating the whys of our life, why do we make the choices we have? The deeper we dig, the more complicated it becomes. The more we realize that our motives are not pure, that our motives are a mixture of what we want to do, what we ought to do, what we should do, what we're supposed to do, and what we want to do, and what we like to do, and what we fantasize about doing. And all of those are informing our decisions. I mean, why do you want to get rich? Who wouldn't want to be rich? Rich is awesome. Rich is greater than poor. Trust me, I've been both. Rich is better. I mean, who wouldn't want to be rich because of the comfort you can have, because of the things that it would mean to yourself? Did any of you happen to see Derek Carr's press conference the other day? You know who Derek Carr is? Derek Carr is a young quarterback for the Oakland Raiders, or the Los Angeles, or the Las Vegas Raiders. And he just signed the richest contract in NFL football history. He signed a 5-year contract for $125 million to play football. And he had a press conference, and somebody at the press conference asked him, "What are you going to spend your money on?" Good question. He looked at him, and you can Google this, you can YouTube this, verify it. You know what he said? "Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tithe." Somebody invite Derek Carr to this church. He said, "I've been tithing since I was in college, living on $700 a month on an athletic stipend. My wife and I have been tithing our whole life, and the first thing we're going to do is tithe. You know what excites me the most about the money," he said, "is the people we can help and the good we can do." You want to know what a pure motive looks like? Looks like that. But you know what's in the shadow of that pure motive? After he tithes? $112.5 million. I don't know about you. I could live on that. I could get by. You see, none of us has pure motives. We seek to purify our motives. We hope to purify our motives. But motives are this tricky, mysterious thing. And when it becomes insidious is when we bully people by judging their motives. By saying, oh, I saw what you did and I know why you did it. I mean, in the legal system, it's important to gain a conviction. To gain an indictment, you have to have some sense of the motive. Why was this crime committed? In fact, we've created a whole category of crimes based strictly on hate, on the motive of hate. Because we understand the power of motive in the legal system, you can build a stronger case for getting to the truth if you understand the motive. Relationally, we understand how important motive is in our relationships with one another. Have you ever had an argument with your spouse where you said these words? I know what you said, but that's not what you meant. Am I the only person that has ever said that to my wife? In fact, early on in our marriage, I remember I was writing down what we said to each other in arguments so that we could go back and say, this is what you said, I wrote it down, to which she would say to me, I know that's what you said, but that's not what you meant. And by saying that, she was basically discrediting what I was saying because she knew, or I knew, that she didn't mean what she said, that the why behind her statement was dishonest, was impure. See how messy motives can be? You see how we bully other people and we are bullied by judging their motives? See, the question isn't, do you know the difference between manipulation and motivation? The lesson of Joseph's life is not to teach us the difference between those two things. The lesson of Joseph's life is to teach us that he's just like us. He's a flawed human being who may do the right thing for the wrong reasons and do the wrong thing for the right reasons. And that in his desire to do what is best, sometimes his motives are going to get messy. Well, my friend confronted me a number of years ago and said that I had offended him and that he and his wife could no longer carry on a relationship with my wife and I because he questioned my motives. He questioned my honesty, my sincerity, the purity of what I did. I can't to this day remember. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was I did. I'm sure what I did was offensive. I'm sure that what I did was something that you would categorize as wrong, that I would categorize as wrong. But that's not where the hurt was inflicted. That's not where the bullying took place. It took place in the accusation that I had done it intentionally, that I intended to hurt, that my motive was on purpose to disregard them or hurt them. This is where the line is. It's a moving, difficult, dental floss thick line that each of us stand or falls before God on. It's our responsibility is to do our best to understand the why and the motive in our lives and to be very careful when we judge someone else's motives. Because you see what happens when I judge your motives? What happens when I judge your motives is I'm saying more about my motives than I am about yours. I'm actually revealing more of my motivation than I am understanding yours. Because we're all different. We're all motivated by different things. Some people get excited when I come out here in a warm-up suit with a headset on. And they're thinking, oh man, we are going to get it done today. We're going to get excited. And I understand that some of you here got excited when the lights were flashing and music was playing and we were getting all charged up. Me, nah, it doesn't work for me. I mean, motivational ideas are kind of demotivating for me. They actually have the opposite effect. So I'm really not good at this motivational thing. In fact, there are some motivational sayings that I find actually to be demotivating. Let me share with you the top 5 demotivating motivational statements that I am familiar with. Number 5 of the most demotivating motivational statements, you got to pay attention to this one. It is real eyes realize real lies. Goodness gracious. Really? I mean, that's either a line to a rap song or a poetry or something. I mean, that's so creepy and syrupy. Real eyes realize real. I mean, there's truth there. Real eyes do realize real lies, but really say it like that, you're wearing me out. I'm tired of it already. Number 4, perhaps you've heard this one. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. Ugh. Oh. Really? I'm sure the first time somebody said that, everybody went, wow. And then the second time everybody heard it, they went, ugh. Number 3 on my top 5 worst demotivational phrases is dream like you're gonna live forever. Live like you're gonna die today. How depressing is that? Dream like you're gonna live forever, yeah. Live like you're gonna die today. Okay, give me all your money. Give me your car. Gee, where's your credit cards? Because I'm running up the bills. I'm dying today. I'm going all out. Really? That's a motivational phrase? People say that to get motivated? Ugh. Now the last 2 are really frightening, and I didn't know these existed as motivational phrases, but apparently they do. Ready for this? You're only as strong as the drinks you mix, the tables you dance on, and the friends you party with. This is a sign that hangs over 6th Street downtown in Austin, motivating you to go and waste your life. This is a motivational phrase, but it's not as bad as number 1. Number 1 is live for the nights you'll never remember with the friends you'll never forget. We have meetings every day on our campus over in the quads if this is a motivational phrase for you. If this motivates you, then we have a group of people who sit around themselves in the meetings and introduce themselves just by their first names. If that motivates you, that meeting is for you. You want to know what motivates me, what gives me an idea of how we should evaluate the motives of others? When you evaluate the motives of other people, give them the benefit of the doubt and begin with yourself.